What's up, man?
What up?
How's it going?
Oh, fun stuff over on this side.
Right?
You hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. What was that? What kind of extract was that you made?
That's a blue honey. Buddy of mine gifted me that. He threw a whole bunch of variety of mushrooms, bunch of the pottery bottom of the bags that he had, a whole shitload of variety, and then just layered it in a jar, poured a bunch down the jar, put some honey on top, and then just kept repeating the
Oh,
layers
I
until it
got
filled
you.
it up.
I got you. I got you.
Yeah,
I got
stuff was so thick that when you open it up, the lid just fucking held itself open.
you. Yeah.
Never seen stuff that
Pretty-
strong before.
It looked interesting.
Oh yeah, it's pretty intense. For the amount that I took, it's giving me like the kind of effects that maybe 1 or 2 grams of mushrooms would give the average person. So for me to get that effect, it means it's somewhere between 7 to 10 grams dosage. My tolerance to mushrooms has gone like super insane ever since I started my journeys into the hyperdimensional and
Right.
experimenting with all that stuff. Yeah, that, that whole thing was a whole part of my life that I never even thought was ever going to happen.
Is that something new? You just recently started eating hallucinogens, or it's just gotten amped up lately?
I just got amped up. I mean, 'cause when I was younger, I used to eat booms all the time. It's only eating eighths to 5 grams. I think the most I ever did when I was younger was like 7 grams, and just fucking just trip my balls off, fucking like no other. Uh, and then here recently, just about 3 or 4 years ago, I had the opportunity to grab a pound of booms, and I thought, well, they don't come around this area very often, and I know some people who are into that. So I talked to some buddies and say, hey, dude, if I got some shit, would you be into that? And they're like, oh, yeah, dude, let's do that. And once it showed up, they all flaked out on me. So I literally had to eat it figuratively and literally eat that whole pound myself, shared it with my buddy whenever he was free to eat up. But it got to a point where I got through about half that pound, and the mushrooms just weren't hitting like they were. Like, I was like, well, either they're starting to go weak,
Yeah,
or who knows
they don't last
yeah,
forever.
and if they're not stored properly, they will start to go down, degrade.
Yeah.
So then I just started eating more and more. So I was like, fuck it, I mean, who cares? I mean, just fucking eat, double size dose, whatever it took to actually get me to trip. And then one day, not really paying attention to how much I'm eating, it was probably somewhere around 20, 21 grams of some golden teachers is what it was.
Yeah,
And
find a different strain. Like that's usually one of those where, like, I mean, so we get into another one of these like discussions about the subjective nature of what you experience versus what's in the mushrooms,
oh yeah,
right? And so with so much of what's there, trying to determine how much that varies from one to
oh
another
yeah,
is kind of subjective. Like a lot of that is just set and setting, your experience level, once again, how much you've been taking lately.
yeah.
And it's one of those things that, like, man, I've always kind of found like it's one of those things that's best to do really heavy a few times and then just not for a while. And just
All right.
because, like, all of those tryptamines, your body builds up tolerance to them so fast that, like, even if you get something out of it, like, even if you're getting something out of it, it's not always going to be as profound if you're hitting it back to back to back.
All right. It all depends. Uh, what you're looking for to get out of it, I guess. But yeah, it's definitely not something for everybody, because the first time I ever went hyperdimensional was off about 20, 21 grams, and I literally thought I killed myself off of mushrooms because it was an experience I'd never had before. Went to a
Yeah.
whole different dimension, was surrounded by all these strange entities that were fucking, it was really, really bizarre. And straight up thought I'd fucking overdosed and I was dead, and I was like, oh fuck, man, this fucking sucks, because this is like not at all what I wanted. Then all of a sudden I come to waking up on my floor in my fucking house. I'm like, what the fuck was that, dude? That is crazy. And then ever since then I've been propelled to do keep going deeper and stronger. And so for like the last 3 years straight, every single weekend I've been mega dosing.
Nice,
No,
nice. Yeah, and
no,
that's pretty much all your experience has generally been with psilocybin, with mushrooms.
uh, yeah, I've never done DMT. I've done acid once. Didn't care for acid at all. Uh, there's just something about psilocybin that's just different, you know. It just hits in another way. And then plus, when you do on those high doses like that, it is indistinguishable from the effects of DMT. The only main difference is that DMT lasts 15 to 20 minutes, while
Right,
psilocybin
right,
lasts 3.5, 4 hours for that peak
right,
where you're getting it.
right.
And that's not a statement coming from me. That's coming from a person who is highly more experienced in the field of doing all types of exotic hallucinogens. The guy's name is Kalindi Ai. Highly recommend people check that guy out. He's got some amazing lectures on YouTube. Goes into very in depth about the history of psychedelics and how they have shaped humanity from the very beginning. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, the only reason I ask is like, so when we get into kind of comparing the subjective nature of all these things, and once again, like it's kind of one of those things where you go at a certain level, right? Taking more of whatever you're
Right.
taking, usually you hit a ceiling with kind of how intense, but
Yeah.
then you hit a point where that intensity is going to last longer. So when we talk about
Yeah.
like acid, for instance, acid has this long tail on it. It comes up like a rocket. It hits you really hard.
Yeah.
You know, the first peak is usually all you get. Like you almost don't get another, like there's almost no getting back up.
Yeah.
You know, with mushrooms to me were always a little more organic in a sense of how they feel in your body, the load the next day,
Yeah.
generally how tough it is when um, how the big one is body load. You know, how much can you get versus how much are you going to feel it the next day, the
Right.
next week. And so, there was this general consensus for decades that all hallucinogens were super safe and that there were no bad sides because generally can't die. And there was a lot of like, we didn't want to acknowledge that taking too much of anything is really not great, long
Right.
term. And they should really be one of those things where you're like, you hit it, get what you need, take a break, let yourself kind of reset and
Right.
so you're not dealing with so much body load, you're not
Yeah.
dealing with so much just serotonin deficiency the next week. And just, there's so many things. It's a lot worse with stuff like MDMA, a lot worse,
Right.
like a
Oh yeah.
lot worse. And a lot of the phenethylamines in general are really tough on the body, which is always funny to me that we didn't see more mescaline. Like mescaline is an amazing chemical. It's an amazing trip. It runs a little long, but no worse than LSD. But the
Right.
reality is there's so many people growing Trichoceres cactus now. It's one of the, there's probably one of the biggest fields of, plant collecting outside of weed clones and shit.
Right.
Like people collecting, various Trichoceres species, the Lophophora species, all of the mescaline-containing cacti, but we still don't see that much mescaline.
Yeah. No. I don't think I've ever heard of wasn't until I got locked up in prison that I heard of anybody that ever personally met anyone that's ever used that. One guy that I met, he was an extreme psychonaut that he would do anything and everything that involved psychedelics. Like there was no limit. Like, I
That's
mean, he
dangerous.
just told me some of his stories, and I was like, dude, that's fucking insane. Like when you talk to the guy, you could tell that there was several heavy experiences that he took that he never fully came back from. They were overlapped on each other, and there was times where he spoke very lucidly, and other times it was like as if the guy was in the most intense fucking trip you ever
Yeah.
could experience. But yeah,
The
he told me the
problem,
only reason he ever did meth was that he could stay up long enough so that he can hallucinate off of a lack of sleep. He
that's
tried
right.
doing it
There's,
naturally, and
there's
he
much
couldn't do it.
better.
But
There's much better ways to get there. So,
oh
like
yeah,
the thing that really, when we get into some of those, when you talk to people like that are just like, I'll take whatever, I don't care, just let me have it.
yeah,
Like there's some of those phenethylamines, especially in the DO, the DOB, DOI, they're toxic.
oh
They're
yeah,
you can die. They're vasoconstrictors. That you can absolutely die. Like you
yeah.
can absolutely die from taking too much.
He said when he was I think he was like 14 or 15, him and his buddies got some PCP from this Native American, and so like the four of them got so messed up on it that they turned and beat the fuck out of the dude, and left him for dead. They threw him in the dumpster and fucking beat him within an inch of his life. They said they had no reason to do so, but the shit got him so fucking twisted they thought he was a demon, and they fucking tried to eradicate him. I was like, dude, what the fuck? These 4, 14, 15-year-old kids beating up this 40-year-old Native American.
Yeah. Disassociatives in general are really tricky. It's not something that I've the sort of people that I've talked to that have more than a single passing of experience with them are generally the sort of people that are not quite 100% in the first place. Like they do really, it's a tough class of chemicals. And I mean, that's what's so funny to me, that ketamine became so big. The only difference is ketamine is just as dissociative, but the difference is it's much more of a downer. It's much more of a sedative. Like it's not a chemical that, generally speaking, you're going to go eat somebody's face off of. Now, we get into the whole, I don't know how versed you are in drug culture and whatnot, but one of my favorite stories was always the story of Michael Ehrlich that became the movie Party Monster, starring Macaulay Culkin, that told the story of the kind of late 80s, early 90s dance scene, early electronic scene in New York City, and how that kind of became this bigger thing, kind of post Andy Warhol, and how eventually what happened is that one of the kids that was throwing these huge parties ended up killing his drug dealer, and they kind of blamed it on a ketamine, meth binge, and this, that, or the other. But generally speaking, that's one of the only ones I can really think of where you really hear of somebody, especially with ketamine, that it got really weird and something straight. But with PCP specifically, and all of those piperazines. And here's what's really tricky. For decades, almost a decade or more, kind of in the middle of the 2000s, almost all of the pressed pills that were being sold as MDMA were actually some form of a piperazine, which is essentially an analog of PCP, to be short about it. Those kind of got taken over by the kind of what's the chemical, the big one that's in clot? Anyway, cathinone, the substituted cathinone class. So essentially that's what took over after all the piperazines essentially stopped flooding out. And then now when you go on drugsdata.org and you look at what people are testing, it's almost all MDMA is actually MDMA again. But for there was 10, 15 years there in the middle of 2000s that if you watch drug trends, so much of what was being sold as MDMA on the MDMA, world market was either a substituted piperazine or a substituted cathinone. And that hasn't changed all that much. The ones that are fake, that's still what it is.
I believe it. You say so, I'll believe it.
No, I mean, if we're talking psychedelics, man, that's pretty much always been my wheelhouse for 20-some years. Everything from, and I'm not as involved on the practice side these days as I am on the theory side, whereas in my younger days, we most everything I tried and generally speaking, knew what I was taking and was willing to try most anything, and found the worst of that. The reason I always speak of the DOX chemicals, bromo dragonfly, I think is the DOB is what they call that one. DOI is another one that goes around. I got something that sold to me as weak acid, right?
Yeah.
And, kind of compensated for the dosage. It was not. It was definitely one of the DOX chemicals. Right. And it was one of the worst times I've ever had in my life. And not just because it was a bad trip. You've had enough of those, you kind of know what comes with that. But there were side effects that I knew. I was having leg tremors to the point where my legs were just uncontrollably shaking. You come to find out it's because it's a vasoconstrictor and it's your heart's not doing so well.
It's all about knowing what you're taking, and if you'd have known beforehand, you'd be like, I fucking can't take that shit.
No, I wouldn't have. To be fair, that was one of the only ones where I got something that wasn't what I thought it was and still took it. Yeah. But it's a cautionary tale, man, to just know what you're taking, especially in today's day and age where so much of what's out there can kill you. it's not just the days of, you know, LL and mushrooms and, you know, stuff like that, where
Right.
everything was just a good time. And most of the stuff was, until you got into the really hard stuff, most of the hallucinogen stuff and stuff like that was fairly safe. But
Yeah.
that's not the case anymore. There's so much
Yeah.
stuff that is legal in another country, or that is an analog that maybe nobody's really, you know, delved into too much. And like I said, once again, if you go to drugsdata.org and you just go look at like what is being tested, you can see some patterns of, you know, certain drugs are what they are, or you tend to see certain drugs being substituted and stuff like that a lot. And it's, you really never know what you're taking, man. And I always
Yeah.
tell people, be real careful with
Oh,
whatever
yeah.
it is that you're enjoying. But, you know, it's a cautionary tale. We've all had a bad night on something. Like,
Absolutely.
you know.
I even had a buddy that made his own first time making tincture, and he just thought that make tincture, you just got to make it as strong as possible. So he would soak the material. He had weed, concentrate, all different kinds of shits, fucking strained it out, put more weed in there, add more alcohol. He did that over a period of a few months, let it evaporate out until it was just a black fucking liquid, just looked nasty. And people were drinking like quarter ounce, half ounce fucking shots of it, and they're blacking out off it or who knows what. And I was like, dude, those guys are all a bunch of pussies. They don't have no tolerance, dude. I'll show you how it's done. Pour me a fucking full shot, and it was like almost an ounce and a half. And it tasted like liquid fucking lawn clippings. It was fucking so disgusting. I fucking almost wanted to puke just off the flavor. And I was like, all right, dude, I'm going to go home, see what happens. I'll let you know. I go home. I'm sitting there chilling, waiting forever. And I'm like, yeah, I knew it. This is all a bunch of bullshit. Fucking half hour, an hour goes by, nothing. Not a fucking thing's going on. So I go and eat some chips and dip, roll up some blunts, start smoking it. No more than halfway through my blunt, the room just started fucking spinning like a motherfucker. Like I was fucking drunk off my ass. And I was like, oh, shit, dude. I fucking put that out, end up fucking passing out, wake up. I was so fucked up. I literally thought I was going to die. I mean, like, it's the first time ever in my life I thought weed was going to kill me. It was fucking insane. I had a friend come over that was supposed to grab some weed before he was going on a fishing trip. And it took every ounce of my brain power to say the most simplest things. And he's like, dude, what's wrong with you, man? Are you all right? And I'm like fucking trying to speak. And it's just the most difficult struggle to say, and I mean, it was insane. I mean, fucking could barely even move. Couldn't move a single limb. Like oh, lift your leg. Yeah, that ain't gonna happen. Fucking, you know, not like edible, like where you're just so fucking blasted that you're like, oh, dude, I'm just melted to the couch. It was more like I felt like I was there was like some kind of toxic fucking overload. It was just fucking, it was bad. I was like, dude, I'm gonna be the first person to die off of fucking weed, and I'm gonna fuck up the cause for everybody. I was like, God damn it, dude, this is bullshit.
You know how many people have done that, though? So, man, I'm pretty much of the same ilk as your friend in that I've always been, if I'm going to make edibles, there's a fine line between how much can I put in this and it still be something somebody will eat, right?
Exactly.
And and I always tend to err more on the, well, listen, if it's nasty, but we only have to eat a tiny little bit of it, that's probably going to be better for us. So what that's led to is I've made that mistake a few times. I always forget that, like, my regular world friends who aren't people that are in the weed industry or the weed business, they're usually pretty casual smokers and people that just, you know, like to get high. And I always fuck up and get everybody so baked that everybody looks like they're on drugs.
Absolutely.
And I do have a really bad habit of making edibles so strong just because I don't like to have to eat. Here's what happened. When I was very young, when I was 15, 16, 17, the first time, 2 or 3 times that I ate weed, we took a bag of pretty much swag weed and just crumbled it up into a brownie mix. Seeds, sticks, stems, everything. We didn't know any different. We thought we broke it all up and it all went in. And, bro, to this day, I can't eat weed brownies. I almost can't eat regular brownies. Like, just because I just remember those seeds in my teeth and sticks and stems, and it was so horrible. But we got so baked, baked. And after that, I always tried to make edibles to the point where, like, if we don't have to eat a lot of it, then we're good, you know? Like, the best part is to not really have to, you know, chow down on a whole block of fudge or a whole thing of, you know, whatever it is.
Bag of gummies
And most edibles, generally speaking, unless you're making your own edible, most edibles are just, you know, whatever. They're almost always sweets.
Yep.
They're never like a food that you can keep or something, you know,
Which,
unless you're just making literal dinner and you throw some hash oil in or something, you know.
That's a
Most
product I think
edibles are
that'd be.
candy.
I'm surprised they don't actually have that as a product where they just provide can of butter or oil that's already made ready for baking
That's
and
a
all that kind
thing.
of stuff.
Oh, that's
I mean,
definitely a thing. Yeah, in legal states, that's definitely a
yeah,
thing. Yeah. I mean, dude, I've seen everything from, you know, vegetable oil, butter, stuff like that,
yeah,
to just essentially like just pure THC that's in a form that you
yep,
can add to
edible
anything.
form, yeah,
Yeah, just there's microencapsulation.
yeah,
There's a couple other different things that you can put it in drinks, you can put it in whatever. But like before that, when we were doing, you know, I've done edibles for years and years and years, different things. We did medicated lemonade, we did medicated lollipops, we did medicated popsicles, tons of ice cream. But yeah, there's kind of this balance where you're kind of like, how strong can I make it so that I can get high, but so that I don't have to eat, you know, a whole tub of ice cream or like, you know, a whole sack of candy.
right,
Like it's just not, you know.
yeah. No, we last trip out to Denver, me and my buddy decided to spring on some of these edibles, knowing that it wasn't going to get us fucked up, but we just want to try some. And I was pretty surprised at how delicious some of them were. I was like, dude, I don't even care if there's even weed in it. This shit tastes so good. I'd buy this on a regular just because it's fucking bomb as fuck.
Yeah.
Like, why don't they make regular candy this fucking good?
Dude, the industry's come so far. So when I first moved to Denver in 2014, it was mostly the basics. It was a lot of like Tootsie
Yeah.
Rolls and, you know, hard candy and stuff like that. I do want to say one of the greatest edibles that I ever had was this spot we used to get 1,000 milligram Nutella, like
Yeah.
Nutella, the spread, and it was just hazelnut spread, and you could just literally just dip it out, and it was so good. But like from that point to now, like after like they finally got a lot of rec laws changed, they changed packaging laws on a bunch of things. There was a whole bunch of different stuff that like they wanted to be super careful that like little kids weren't eating edibles and all this other stuff. So they made the rules so prohibitive that like you almost can't make regular food because it has to be like single serving. It has to be able to be tested at like 5 milligrams per serving for the rec stuff. You know, and it's like the packaging is super anal. They have to be printed on the thing. It has to say THC.
Yeah.
So, like, if you wanted to sell some sort of savory food or, you know, something else, you'd have to be able to stamp it with THC on it. And so California, after California went legal, they kind of did it a little more loose with their laws and regs, and they have a little bit less strict edible regulations. Not to say they're perfect either, but Colorado's market changed a ton from 2016 to current day because they just changed so many rules and regs. But there's still a ton of edible companies that make really awesome, really interesting edibles in the Colorado legal market. Like, you know, if you're just looking for gummies or, you know, stuff like that. But one of the ones we always used to love was the breath mints. The strips, like the breath strips that were really popular a couple of years back. Of just, you know, it's just a little thing of like glycerin with mint or something infused, but they make them with weed infused. And so it'd be, you know, 15, 20 milligrams or something for just a little square. And it's a breath freshener, and it was really nice. You know, odd stuff like that is always my favorite. Probably the worst one I ever had in my life were these inhalers, and it was essentially just aerosolized tincture, just alcohol-based tincture. And so you were just literally, I don't know if you've ever tried to breathe in aerosolized alcohol, it will get you pretty good, but like it's the worst delivery method ever on the planet for anything other than, you know, albuterol or something. And so it was so bad, so bad. And you just hit it and you would literally just choke. Like you would just choke because it was so hard to deal with.
Yeah, that's people have that old fucking belief that, oh, if you don't cough, you don't get off, dude. It's like, that's fucking ain't true, man. If it's making you cough, there's something that ain't right.
It wasn't even that. It's like, so like in a lot of these newly legal states, one of the things that the big goal, right, is to build a product or to come up with something that's so new that you can just sell the licensing of that product.
Right.
Because then you don't even have to be in the legal world. You don't have to run weed plants. You don't have to. It's the most basic way to get into the weed game.
Right.
Is to try and come up with a new product that is a new concept or a new delivery or a new something that you can then take to investors or whoever, money people, and you can say, hey, listen, just buy me out of this idea. It's the cheapest buyout there is, right? You don't have to build a dispo. You don't have to build a grow. You don't have to build anything on a commercial level. You don't have to run anything. You just come up with a good idea. So, like, in a lot of the newly legal states, you see a lot of that because there's a lot more idea people out there than there are weed people. And it's a lot easier for somebody to say, oh, well, here's a neat little niche of a product that doesn't exist, sell that for a couple $1 million to a Hawthorne or to a bigger investment company. And you don't really ever have to really be involved at the weed business. And now you're in the weed business, And that's one of those things that, like, when I see stuff like that, the inhaler, and when I see products like that, I just go, man, that's somebody who didn't really know weed that well, who just had a cool idea or what they thought was a cool idea and just threw it together and hoped it would work, and it didn't. Let's be honest, for every one that works, there's probably 150 that are terrible ideas and they don't make it. And, you know. But yeah, and so, especially with Colorado, when we talk about their edible market, like there was a couple brands out there that just did what they did really, really well and just did that continuously. And that was just their thing. They had a niche and they sold gummies or they sold, and they worked on their branding, their marketing. And then so many of those companies, they can't just be an edibles company because the way it's all integrated, you almost have to have a grow, and you have to have, because it's cheaper to produce your own weed, generally speaking, than it is to have to constantly buy wholesale weed. Right. And so, they branch out into other areas where they don't necessarily have as much experience, and it really leads to, just generally speaking, another grow or another, extraction lab where people don't really know what they're doing. They're just doing it because they got into another niche of the industry, and that's just what they're working with.
Right. Let's see, you're prepping a dab there, then I'll do a dab myself.
I'm going to have to heat this one up again because I just completely talked through my dab. So let me ask you, I do have a question I wanted to ask you, man.
Yeah.
Hold on one sec.
Yeah.
So one of the first things that I remembered seeing your page, I follow a ton of weed pages, and the ones that generally stand out to me are people that either take really good pictures, right, have just amazing strains, or people who consistently, follow my page and that I see back and forth and, we end up having a dialogue. And I remember. One of the first things that I remember asking you about was your pictures. Because you take some of the best shots that I've seen as far as, like, when we talked about it, you told me, if I'm not mistaken, most of your stuff is all camera phone pictures. Absolutely. But, man, you get some of the best pictures of trikes on plants that I've seen. And, like, that's one of those things I wanted to ask you about because, let's be honest, if you take enough pictures, you can usually snap some good ones. Oh, yeah. But, man, I think consistently your pics do so well as far as taking great pictures of resin, like of actual trike, not necessarily close-ups and macros, but just really good shots of trichome coverage. Absolutely. Some of your pictures, man, I just feel like I could reach in and pluck off a trike.
Yeah, that's definitely my goal is to try to get it to that quality without having to go the expense of buying the high end equipment in order to make it look that way. But yeah, my younger years, when I had a lot more dreams and hopes in my eyes, I wanted to be a professional photographer, mainly doing nature shots, travel around the world, all that kind of stuff. That seemed exciting because when I was back in high school, I was in a program called People to People, where they take students from across the country, take them to other countries to learn about their culture, their history, their government, all that kind of stuff. And you learn it in a way that average tourists are never going to be able to experience it. So by the time I was 16 years old, I went to 11 different countries, and it really opened my eyes to the world outside the U.S. You know, it's one of the things that most people live in this country don't realize, that U.S. is not the fucking the world, and that there's a lot better places out there than the U.S. to see, to live, to experience. I mean, it's nice to be here, but it's definitely not the best place on the planet to exist. We can be real about that. This is all pre-pandemic. The way the world is now outside of that, I have no idea. But yeah, the photography, that was the thing I was all about. That I took that in high school, learned how to process pictures the old-fashioned way, and really wanted to go take that in tech class and all that kind of stuff. But then doing regular work and all that kind of shit got in the way of pursuing life dreams. And then the opportunity for our family to take over the restaurant that I was working in came up, because the guy who ran it was retiring, so we took over that. So it was like, put all my life's dreams and hopes on hold so I can help keep doing this thing, which that was a big mistake. But that's a whole nother story I'd rather not ever get into.
Do you shoot Android or iPhone?
Android.
See, that's even crazier. Yeah, man. I mean, like, one of the things that I did, and the other thing is you run a lot of banana. Like, you and I traded some stuff at one point, and I think a lot of what I got from you was all banana heavy stuff, which is just, yeah, I fuck with anything banana any day,
Yeah.
8 days a week. And that's one of those with me. Like, if I just ran out of stuff to run, let's say I didn't have any projects and I didn't really know what I was doing. It doesn't ever really happen, but let's just say I had some free space and had some time, right? The first thing I'm going to run is just banana. I'm just going to go through and run anything that says banana on it, and anything that says Kush, and anything that says, like anything that I know is going to be heavy myrcene. And that's usually where I'm going to start with, like, if I'm just running something for fun or for myself or just, and that's one of those things that, like, I want to work more into my seed work. The thing that's funny that I found, though, about so many of those banana strains, the banana terps, like when you find a particular cut that just dumps that crazy candy banana, when you make crosses with those, it's pretty rare that that carries over, but to a very small percentage of plants. So it's one of those things that, like, so many of those banana strains aren't super long worked plants. They're not plants that have a ton of inbreeding and isolation, and particularly, breeding for one particular strain. It's just a cut that somebody found that really tasted like banana and they loved it. And, the reason that I love those strains is genuinely, I've said 100 times, it's high myrcene. Most of those banana strains are the strains that test really high in myrcene. It's one of those things that, like, it's worth working with. But the reason I think I haven't worked with it more is because you don't necessarily know what percentage is going to be banana. And as soon as you name something banana, people immediately want every one of those plants to look and taste like banana. And that's not how that terp works.
Yeah, like a lot of them, it seems like the only one that carries over consistently is orange. The orange flavor.
Citrus can be really dominant. Yeah, I agree with that. The thing with banana,
it is definitely tricky using specific fruit names because people have that expectation to find that. But for me personally, what I found is that just the, like you said, the type of high terpenes that are in there is what gives me extreme medical benefits. I've noticed that it helps a lot with managing chronic pain that I have with my back pain. Back in 2001, I was in a car accident, fucked me up pretty bad. And not even like at the time fucked me up. It was one of those walked away thinking that everything's okay, and then all of a sudden 8 years later you can't fucking move. Struggling to put on your underwear, fucking the simplest things are almost impossible. It was pretty bad, and chiropractor couldn't even understand how I was able to walk and do the shit I was doing. I was like, well, fucking weed gets me through a lot of it, but now it's to the point where I can't fucking do shit. And chiropractor helped a little bit, and the thing that helped most with my back, believe it or not, was when I got put in prison and had to do work release. The job I had was on the other side of town, and the only mode of transport that they let you from the prison is on a bicycle. So I had to ride a bicycle fucking across town fucking multiple times a day. And when it was going to fucking start, I was like, fuck, this is going to be murder on my back. And within a week, all my back problems just fucking just gone. This is fucking eliminated. All I needed was just some exercise to help out with a lot of it. And then once I got out, it was just been kind of touch and go since then. But as long as I stay active, it doesn't really fucking hit me that bad.
Well, see, man, that's where I picked up myrcene, where I picked up kush. That's where so much of that started with me, was that I had similar issues. An athlete as a kid, like I played soccer, was really rough on my joints. So by the time I was an adult, like I needed something that could help when I needed, when I had pain situations. And I tended to find that if it was sativas or sativa heavy strains, they didn't necessarily provide that sort of like body relief, muscle relaxing, like that sort of thing that like myrcene heavy cushes, any strain. I always joke that myrcene is a cheat code for breeders, because if you breed strains that are heavy in myrcene, everybody's going to tell you your weed is strong as fuck. Even if it tests 22%, mid-20s, it's still, that myrcene makes your THC more bioavailable.
Absolutely.
So it makes it so that THC is easier to absorb into your system, essentially, and it means you get more of what's there. So it doesn't have to be 33%, because what is there, more of it is actually entering your bloodstream and actually getting into your system.
Definitely.
And so with myrcene, it really is a cheat code. The only problem is most of the old world kushes aren't actually giant trichome plants. Like a lot of the older world kushes, when you think of the master kushes, the deep chunks, your GDP is one I always point to. Granddaddy Purple has some of the worst trichomes of any plant, if you've ever worked with hash. But the strains like Banana Kush, Banana OG, these are strains that, generally speaking, have bigger trichomes, heavy myrcene content, but a lot of the banana strains can be really waxy. So there's a higher cuticle to oil ratio in the trichome. And so that's why making Banana Kush crosses, it's an awesome project, because there's so much good about a lot of those strains and the trichomes and the way they're made. So if you cross it to something else that just washes really well, man, I've seen so many Banana Kush hybrids and F1s and F2s and stuff do really, really well in the wash. But it's one of those things that, like, you really have to do the breeding. And then a lot of times, if it's not banana heavy, right? So if you sell it as banana, the one thing that I've found with a lot of those banana crosses is that they just tend to be kind of generic cushy. So once you cross it out to something else, you'll find the banana heavy candy, banana runts, candy type profiles, but they're usually pretty rare.
Yeah.
And they're, maybe 1% or something. Yeah. Then you just get a bunch of plants that just are just generic kush. Like, it's not really a super spectacular looking, And so that's the problem with naming stuff. I get a lot of shit because I put a lot of effort into my strain names. Because I try to come up with unique stuff that's different, that I know somebody hasn't already done before. That alone is tough, right? It's not that easy. But I've had
Well,
people hit me up and they go, well, why don't you just name it how it smells or how it tastes? And I'm like, that's not really how this works. Because if
right,
I tell you, first of all of those strains are taken. All of those, every strain that you can possibly think of that has anything to do with the flavor, a taste, a pine, anything has probably been taken. But the other side is, if I give you 10 seeds and 2 of them taste like oranges and I named it orange, well, then you're going to be pissed.
right.
You know, and a lot of F1s, especially stuff that I've done, some of the Nard Champa stuff, some of the pineapple sorbet stuff, that stuff's so exotic that every single plant is going to have its own thing.
Right.
You know, there might be some things that are kind of similar, but I mean, trying to name all your strains based on exactly what they taste like, and that's impossible. Like, it's
Yeah,
tough
no,
enough just to come up with unique names that nobody else has used, that nobody's going to want to get, you know, super
yeah,
pissed off that you use. I mean, it's a thought exercise that most people don't ever try. Like, just think of a name, pretend you've got a new strain you want to make, think of a name. Now
yeah.
Google it and see if somebody's already used it.
Oh
And
yeah,
try to come up with something that's unique, because it's so
almost every one
tough.
of them.
Yeah,
And
it's
then I
so
even
tough.
said before that if you really have your heart set on using that name and someone's already used it, then tag your breeder name before it. You know, there's no reason
Right.
it can't be done that way. You know, instead of having it be Hayes, it's Simpsons Hayes, it's Simpsons OG Kush. You know?
Even
So what if
that
people have
is
already
tough,
done it,
man,
but
because
it lets them know that this is
so
your
many,
version.
yeah, so many of those. The other side of that is you can't really use stuff that belongs to somebody else. Like,
Oh,
going
that's the same
forward,
thing.
that's not going to be as common, because so
Right.
many of these big companies are going to be willing to go out. So anything like Simpsons related or Disney related,
Right.
or those are extremely litigious companies. And
Yeah.
once you get to a certain size, they are straight up going to sue you. So it's like, that's the other
That's
thing.
That's why I don't use any strain names that have any reference to the show or any of that
Right.
kind of stuff. The whole Simpsons thing is just because I'm a huge Simpsons fan.
Yeah, right.
I'm
Right.
covered with a bunch of Simpsons tattoos. That's the only tattoos I have are Simpsons tats.
Right.
Uh, I've been a fan ever since the very first episode in '89. So it's been a big part of my life because that was the year that we moved from Minnesota down to South Dakota, and I left all my friends behind. Had nobody. I had my older brothers, but they were all dicks. This older brothers are. And that show came out, and I was like, dude, it's fuck my new best friend. So it was like instantly I was identified with Bart, and then as the years went on, I'm more identified with Homer. And fucking the show just it grows on you. My love of the show is the golden years, as it's commonly referred to, and that's the first 10 seasons, because that's when Phil Hartman was in it.
Yeah.
After Phil Hartman's death, it completely changed everything, even the writers and all that kind of stuff, because anytime they knew that they needed to rely on Phil to voice a character, do something, he was there for it. He was all about it. And I mean, you watch any of the old seasons with the audio commentary, and a scene comes up with Phil Hartman, you can tell they instantly get choked up, and the whole thing is tragic. So I have a plan to get a back tattoo, complete tribute to Phil Hartman, where it's going to be a collage of all the characters that he voiced over the years. And then in the center is going to be Lionel Hutz and Troy McClure standing next to each other. So it's going to take some time getting that put together and finding the right artist that'll be able to make it look right. But it's going to be pretty awesome. I also have plans on for my right leg. I want to do a fusion piece of Simpsons and Futurama, because that was also Matt Groening's work. That was absolutely amazing. Love Futurama. I'd probably watch that series a dozen fucking times over. I could recite almost every episode. It's amazing. I love that guy's creativity and his comedic style. It's great.
And anybody that came up in the 90s, anybody that came up in the late 80s, early 90s, like, it's kind of funny because we have these things in America that are so big that they're cultural in a sense. Like, when you look at, so many of the icons, and Mickey Mouse and Coca-Cola, and like so many of these things. But like in the 80s and 90s, Bart Simpson was everywhere. Like it's not really today. They don't market it like they did in the earlier days, but
Yep.
like in the early '90s, Bart Simpson was everywhere.
Oh
Like
yeah.
it was
Oh
everywhere.
yeah.
And I would say globally, it's still probably one of the most well-known IPs and brands on the planet, just
The
because it's been
Simpsons
going
fucking
for
they built
30
that
years or
network.
something.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
Fox is in its infancy, and Married with Children was getting people interested and all that stuff. But then when The Simpsons came on, it was like, bam, fucking made all the other networks fucking shit their pants. Like, fuck.
But back to what we were saying though about the Simpsons in general, and not not at you, but like that's
Right,
one of
right.
those things that like the more I've tried to come up with unique names for strains, the more I've realized that just coming up with any unique word, name, something that's not just in some way derivative of something somebody else has done,
Right.
man, that's not as easy as being. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't know if you generally pay a little bit of attention to my page, but I've been doing a ton of like the AI stuff with the
Right.
Chat GPT and Mid Journey and like just playing around as it kind of benefits my business.
Right.
But I've been thinking of ways that I can use the Chat GPT to start generating new and unique strain names. But even that's it's going to be so tough. So I got into it originally because of Midjourney. I was able to start generating images of my own because I go through so many that like I love paying designers and I have done a ton of like paying designers. But when you do so many in a year and you need so many, then just having an easy, cheap, affordable way to be able to generate your own images is huge. And so I started messing with Midjourney and started making some images for like my strains and stuff like that. But like I have started to kind of think of ways that I can use that to generate new strain names. But even that's going to be so tough because it's not necessarily made for weed stuff. Like its
Right.
knowledge of weed is probably, compared to other things, is probably on the limited side. So it's like it doesn't have, say, a database of every weed strain that's ever been produced. So like asking it to make a new weed strain it would take some kind of unique,
Right.
getting around. But I have thought about it, man. I have thought about, using it to just come up with new and unique words or strains or, strain names or, anything like that.
Definitely. I always feel that when pairing genetics and all that stuff, the name always comes first. I've seen a lot of different breeders like, hey, I got made this cross. What do you guys think of naming it? And it's cool and fun for the internet aspect of it, but in the breeder sense, it's like, come on, dude, if you don't know what you're going to be doing when you're doing it, that's kind of amateurish. You're just slapping shit together and say, you guys figure it out, will you? And then if you like it, then you buy it, please.
Oh, yeah. And there is so much of it that like, so that kind of goes back to what I was saying, because the way that I'll do it is once I have a list of what I'm done, everything's done, the seeds are ready, right?
Yeah.
One of the last couple steps is to give everything a name. So I keep a running tally of just common things that we say, little jokes, words that are just
Yeah.
taken out of phrase, little things, right? And I think to myself, oh, that would make a funny strain name. So I
Yeah.
write it down. And when I go to pair strain names, there's a little bit of like, if you hear the strain name and it immediately see the strain, like the breakdown of the genetics,
Yeah.
and you go, okay, that's clever, that makes sense. If you can somehow tie it to the strain or something like that, that's awesome. But like, yeah, like you said, there's a lot of like, there's so many people right now breeding their own strains. And
Yeah.
so many of these people don't have an eye towards like marketing or towards I'm going to sell this. So many
Right.
people just do it because it's fun and it's a way to have some seeds and and
Yeah.
so you see a lot of people like that where they're like, what should I name this strain or because it's tough. Like
Yeah.
it legitimately is a tough part of coming up with a new strain is
Yeah.
finding a unique name that somebody hasn't already used that's not ripping off some other IP or some other idea. And so
Yeah.
that's why so many people like really get to a point where it's like you know, they just want to throw a name on it and put it out there and just let other people have it. And, you know, gin, you
Yeah.
know, at the end of the day, that's always one of the hardest parts is like finding unique names that we can
Yeah.
use that aren't just biting off of somebody else or that aren't just some, you know, phrase somebody else has already trademarked. And, you know, and so especially if you go through a ton of strains in a year, like
Right.
if you're making a reasonable amount of seeds, and that gets to be tough.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
that
And at the
gets to
same
be
time,
tough.
not everything needs to have a name. You can just list it as the genetics, and that's what it is. You know, I
That's
mean,
true
there's
too.
no shame in that either. I've
And
always
that
felt
should
that
that should
the
always
name,
go with it no matter what. Like
like,
the actual lineage should always be with the strain no matter what. But
oh
at the
yeah,
end of the day, like you never know. There's so much of it that like if you're putting seeds out there, you never know when somebody might pick it up and want to run it.
yeah,
And the first thing they're going to ask you is, "What's it called?"
right.
And
There's
if it's some
one,
ridiculously long lineage, they're just gonna make their own name up for it and
right.
call it whatever they
One
want,
thing
you know?
I don't appreciate is this trend that you see a lot going on, where people grow out something, they find something they really like, so they give it their own name to it. Oh, this is gorilla butter, but I call it white truffle, and it's like, dude, just call it the person that bred it
Yeah.
came up with a name. It took them enough time to come up with a name for it. Then you're gonna go and just give it a different name and try to act like you did something special, other than just popping seeds and not killing a fucking plant. I mean, congratulations, you fucking pat you on the back. Now fucking leave it to the breeders to do their fucking naming and
Bro,
all that kind of shit.
I
Stop
knew that
fucking
I knew
clout
this dude
stealing and
I knew this dude that would do cannabis cups. And he would do that intentionally. He would find other people's gear and then he would just make up a name for it, even though it has a name and everything, just so he could make it seem like it was all him. You know
yeah,
what I'm saying? So like he took one of the strains that I had that was like a super lemon haze GDP that back in the day in the forum days I got from MK Ultra Trees on a forum on like IC Mag, and then years later we end up running back into each other and I realized, you know, yada yada yada, and I had given some to this dude. And gorgeous strain. I didn't get a nug out of it. I didn't get a
uh,
thank you. I didn't get nothing. And when I saw him advertising it on his Instagram, I knew it was my strain because I had been involved with it while he
right,
was growing it, and he was just calling it like the candy, or he had made up some stupid
yeah,
name for it, you know, just so he didn't have to give me credit for it. Which, to be fair, it wasn't. It was just seeds that came out of my seed, out of my like, you know, my collection.
mm,
But at the time, it's like, bro, the least you could do is make sure you put the name with it, so or the genetics with it, so that people know. You know, that's how I found him. That's how I found MK Ultra Trees eventually,
right,
because I had done a trade with him years, maybe early to mid 2000s on maybe IC Mag, and I had these Super Lemon Haze GDP in my stash in my seed bank and my seed collection, and went to do a big seed pop. We found a bunch of like really heavy candy. It's a beautiful cross because the Super Lemon Haze is like the sativa side, the GDP is like all of the best of the indica side. If you find the ones that have big fat trichomes, it's just wind all around, you know. And so there was a bunch of these, a bunch of phenos that just had this really heavy grape candy, you know, like really, really funky profile. And yeah, man, I felt so bad because years later I got back with MK Ultra Trees. We tried to do a pop of the last seeds that he had of that. It
right,
didn't go well, so I felt super bad about it. Like we just didn't get any to pop. They were super old, and he sent me a bunch of them and was like, "Here, if you want a project and you want to mess with it, give it a shot. Here, you know, try it out." And I was like, "Yeah, I got nothing better to do. Like they were that good. I would have tried." I don't think we got 2 plants out of 50 or 60 seeds he had left or something.
yeah, that sucks. But yeah, it's something that I've always been disappointed with over the years of amount of people that I've given seeds to, and then they pretty much disappeared. Never hear from them ever again. Rarely ever get a thank you or a shout out of fucking, hey dude, I got them fucking beans, fucking, you know, appreciate the shit, you know. And it's just like they just
Yeah, right.
disappear, and it's like I don't know if it's that, you know, they're just waiting to see what I produce so they can turn around and rebrand it, or I don't know what the fuck. I don't know what the fuck people's intentions are, because I get told so many different stories, this, that, and whatever of Dude, I've got a brand new tent just to grow all your shit, dude, man, blah, blah. I was like, all right, you don't have to go that extent, dude. I'll just fucking send you some seeds, try them out, fucking whatever. And then, boom, fucking ghost town. Never fucking, half the time they stop even posting on Instagram. I was like, what the fuck, dude, this is crazy.
I popped some of your, I want to say I popped some of your banana rama or banana. There was something banana that I popped. And I don't remember why, but I didn't get a female. I didn't pop a ton of them. Like I just popped a couple of seeds, and I don't remember. Maybe I just got a couple males. I don't remember what the situation was offhand, but I wasn't complaining. It wasn't bitching. It wasn't a thing like that. It was just, I really did, honest to God, try to get some of your stuff in just recently, because when I was going through all this stuff that you had sent me, the thing that popped out was it was tons of banana stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just a sucker for anything banana. You know, anything really banana. If there's banana in the name, you already had me on the hook.
Absolutely. I remember that, you talking about that, and I was more than happy to share. I think it gave you just about a little bit of everything that I had made of the banana varieties at that time. I mean, there was only a couple of them that I didn't share just because I was limited on what I had. Some of them are just, you don't get what you expect out of it. You think you're going to get a nice fucking haul of seeds, and then the next thing you know, you're shucking it. You're like, oh, there's only like 3 or 4 packs of healthy seeds here. What the fuck? This fucking sucks. So you just work it yourself, and then people just have to deal with that. But pretty much ever since I was started my page, I've offered free seeds to anybody. I never really publicly offered that, but anyone that ever reached out, fucking, they always got free seeds of whatever they wanted. I fucking, not really whatever they wanted, but I just sent them a fuckload of fucking variety of shit, whatever I had available at the time.
That's awesome.
As long as they reached out and said, hey, dude, can I get something? Boom, gotcha. I mean, sometimes it was, you had to wait, because it was on my time, not their time kind of shit, and at times I apologized about that to some people, but at the same time, it was kind of testing them to see how much patience they have, what they're willing to wait for something. If they're going to be pestering me every other fucking day, you just send that shit, you got the, blah, blah, blah. It's like, hey, dude, these are free seeds I'm sending you. I can just chill. They ain't going to expire before you get them. They're going to be legit. And everyone that's ever showed their patience, has been rewarded handsomely with it. I've always been generous. Like what I sent you, that's what I would send just about anybody. I love fucking sharing. There's a lot of times people get stuff they've never even seen that I've worked or posted with. I got hundreds and hundreds of fucking varieties that I've made that I hadn't even had time to get to myself, but they're just made in limited small batch kind of stuff. All my pairings that I do are very specifically selected because I research the lineage as much as I can, as much information there is, go as far back as possible, and try to match as much like genetics as possible. I know a lot of people just like to mix it up and try to make it as more varied and whatever, random, and get whatever results. But I find I get more consistent results with what I produce, the more common ground I find between both parents. So like if I'm going to be breeding something with chem, I want to make sure that there's a lot of chem on both sides.
Right. Well, look, man,
so to speak.
We're about to run out of time, like in the minute. I very much appreciate you dropping in, man. This has been a fun one. I don't usually get to talk hallucinogens, so anytime I find somebody that wants to chat hallucinogens or psychedelics in general, I'm always down. It's one of those things that, like, you don't run into a ton of people that want to talk about it these days, unless they're so spun out they don't really, you're just talking about drugs at that point.
And it's hard to gauge some people when you start talking about it if they're just appeasing you and listening to the conversation, or they're actually genuinely interested in what you have to say, because some people are just like, hey, yeah, whatever, you're talking about this shit. Another one looking at you like you're a fucking nutcase.
So we literally 20 seconds, www.terpfiend.com, terpfi3nd.com. Thank you so much, Simpson475.
Yep. Absolutely.
Instagram, best place to find him. We're doing